June 6, 1944. Dawn breaks over the coast of Normandy. Inside a concrete bunker overlooking what the Allies call Omaha Beach, Major Werner Pluskat raises his binoculars with trembling hands. What he sees defies comprehension. A horizon completely blotted out by ships. Thousands of them. Destroyers, battleships, landing craft stretching as far as the eye can see. The Atlantic Wall, Hitler's supposedly impregnable fortress of steel and concrete, is about to face its ultimate test. And from his command post, Pluskat knows with sudden, terrible clarity they are not ready. For years, we've heard the story of D-Day from the Allied perspective, the bravery of American, British, and Canadian soldiers storming the beaches under withering fire. But what about the men on the other side? What did the German defenders see, think, and feel as the largest invasion force in human history materialized before their eyes? This is not a story of heroes and villains in simple terms. This is a story of soldiers trapped in an impossible situation, fighting for a regime many had begun to doubt, watching their world collapse around them in a single catastrophic day. The German defenders of Normandy were not the elite troops Berlin claimed guarded Fortress Europe. Many were teenagers, older reservists, or conscripts from occupied territories with little loyalty to the Nazi cause. They manned bunkers and trenches along hundreds of miles of coastline, never knowing where or if the invasion would come. Some had been waiting for years. Others had only recently arrived, still learning which bunker held the ammunition. On this morning, all their waiting would end. But how did these men experience the longest day? What went through their minds as the naval bombardment began? How did they react when thousands of soldiers emerged from the surf? And when did they realize that the war was lost? The night of June 5th passes slowly for the German defenders along the Norman coast. Weather conditions are abysmal. High winds, rough seas, low clouds. In his headquarters at the 15th Army Sector, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel feels confident enough to leave for Germany. It's his wife's birthday, and he plans to meet with Hitler to request more tanks and reinforcements. The weather is so poor that an invasion seems impossible. Even the mighty Allied fleet cannot launch an amphibious assault in such conditions, or so they believe. Along the coast, German soldiers settle into their routines. Some play cards in dimly lit bunkers, others write letters home. Young Corporal Friedrich Bertenrath, an 18-year-old manning a machine gun position overlooking what will soon be called Easy Red sector of Omaha Beach, shares a can of ersatz coffee with his friend. They joke nervously about the rumors. Invasion fleets, airborne drops, the whole Allied army preparing to land. They've heard these rumors for months. Most soldiers have stopped believing anything will happen. But not everyone is so relaxed. Some officers, those who've seen the intelligence reports and read between the lines of High Command's confident pronouncements, harbor deep anxieties. They know the Atlantic Wall exists more on propaganda posters than in reality. Yes, there are bunkers, impressive concrete fortifications mounting everything from machine guns to massive artillery pieces. Yes, there are mines, obstacles, barbed wire. But the defenses have gaps. Entire sections remain incomplete. And most critically, they lack sufficient mobile reserves to counterattack once a breakthrough occurs. Major Pluskat, commanding an artillery regiment overlooking Omaha Beach, has spent the evening reviewing defensive positions with growing unease. His guns are well placed, his men adequately trained, but he lacks ammunition. Chronic shortages mean strict rationing. He lacks men. His battery is undermanned, filled with older soldiers and Eastern European conscripts who may or may not fight when the moment comes. And he lacks communication. The telephone lines connecting him to divisional headquarters are notoriously unreliable. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, Pluskat is awakened by distant sounds. Thunder? No. Aircraft. Lots of them. The rumble grows louder, wave after wave passing overhead. He steps outside his command bunker and looks up into the dark sky. The clouds are breaking now, and through the gaps, he can see the silhouettes of hundreds of planes heading inland. Paratroopers, he thinks. This is it. After all the waiting, all the drills, all the false alarms, this is actually happening. But paratroopers mean the real invasion force is coming soon. Pluskat returns to his bunker and orders his officers to alert all positions. Then he waits, staring into the darkness, listening to the distant explosions as airborne troops land miles behind the coast. Every minute feels like an hour. At approximately 5:30 in the morning, as gray light begins creeping across the channel, Major Pluskat receives an urgent call from a forward observation post. Ships have been sighted. He grabs his binoculars and rushes to the observation slit facing the sea. For a moment he sees nothing but morning mist and dark water. Then, as the light improves and the mist begins lifting, he sees them. Ships. So many ships that the horizon itself seems to have transformed into a solid mass of steel. His hands shake as he adjusts the binoculars, trying to count, trying to comprehend the scale. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and behind them, hundreds upon hundreds of smaller vessels, landing craft, troop transports. The entire Allied fleet seems to be sitting just offshore, engines idling, preparing for something unprecedented in the history of warfare. Pluskat frantically telephones his divisional headquarters. The officer who answers sounds sleepy, unconcerned. "There are ships on the horizon," Pluskat reports, his voice tight with urgency. "How many ships?" comes the bored reply. Pluskat looks again through his binoculars at the armada assembling before him. "Thousands," he says. "Thousands of ships." There's a pause. Then, "Where are these ships headed?" Pluskat feels a surge of disbelief at the stupidity of the question. "Straight for me," he shouts. Up and down the Normandy coast, other German observers are making the same shocking discovery. At Omaha Beach, at Gold, Juno, and Sword, wherever men have clear views of the channel, the reaction is identical. Stunned disbelief followed by rapidly mounting panic. This is not a raid. This is not a diversion. This is the invasion, the real invasion. And it's hitting here, in Normandy, not at the Pas de Calais, where Hitler and his intelligence chiefs insisted it would come. For months, German planning has been based on a fundamental miscalculation. Hitler, convinced by a masterful Allied deception operation, has kept the bulk of his best divisions waiting near Calais, 200 miles to the northeast. Even now, as reports flood into headquarters of massive landings in Normandy, many German commanders remain convinced this is merely a feint, that the real invasion will still come at Calais. This fatal delusion will prevent German reinforcements from reaching the battle when they are most desperately needed. But the soldiers in the bunkers don't know about high-level strategy or Hitler's miscalculations. They only know what they can see, the largest fleet in history, and it's coming directly toward them. Some men check their weapons one last time. Others pray. A few simply stare, overwhelmed by the impossibility of stopping what's about to hit them. Young Corporal Bertenrath, in his machine gun position, feels his stomach twist with fear. He's heard veterans speak of combat, but nothing prepared him for this industrial-scale approach to warfare, this sense that human courage and individual marksmanship mean nothing against such overwhelming force. At approximately 6:30, the naval bombardment begins. The first shells arrive with a sound like freight trains tearing through the sky. Then the world explodes. Naval guns from dozens of warships open fire simultaneously, hurling thousands of pounds of high explosive onto the coastal fortifications. The earth shakes. Concrete dust fills the air. Men are thrown to the ground by the sheer concussive force of shells landing nearby. Inside the bunkers, the noise is unbearable. A continuous roar of detonations mixing with the screaming whistle of incoming ordnance. For the German defenders, this bombardment represents something beyond their experience. Even veterans who fought on the Eastern Front, who survived the brutal warfare against the Soviets, have never encountered firepower on this scale. The naval guns can fire with precision from miles offshore, systematically working over every known defensive position. Trenches collapse, communication wires are severed. Soldiers who venture outside their bunkers risk being killed instantly by shell fragments or simply by the overwhelming pressure waves from nearby detonations. Inside Major Pluskat's command post, plaster falls from the ceiling with each impact. The electric lights flicker and die, plunging them into darkness lit only by candles and the occasional flash of explosions visible through the observation slits. Pluskat tries to maintain telephone contact with his gun positions, but the lines keep cutting out. He can hear his artillery pieces firing, sporadic booms punctuating the constant thunder of Allied shells. But he has no idea if they're hitting anything. He's firing blind, hoping his men remember their training, praying the guns don't malfunction. The bombardment continues for 90 minutes, though to the men enduring it, time loses all meaning. Some break down completely, sobbing, shaking uncontrollably, unable to function. Officers struggle to maintain discipline, knowing that when the shelling stops, the infantry assault will begin, and they'll need every man at his post. But how do you maintain discipline when the world itself seems to be ending? How do you convince teenagers that they must fight when a single battleship can deliver more firepower than an entire army division? Then, just as suddenly as it began, the naval bombardment lifts. An eerie silence descends, broken only by the ringing in every soldier's ears and the crackle of fires burning in destroyed positions. Men emerge cautiously from their shelters, coughing in the dust-thick air, checking for casualties, trying to assess the damage. Some positions have been obliterated completely, direct hits collapsing bunkers and burying their occupants alive. Others remain intact but isolated, their communication lines cut, their supporting positions destroyed. The Atlantic Wall has holes in it now, big holes, and through those holes, the Allies are coming. Corporal Bertenrath wipes dust from his machine gun optics and looks toward the sea. Through the smoke and morning mist, he can see them now, the landing craft, dozens of them, racing toward the shore. Small gray boxes riding the waves, each packed with enemy soldiers. He chambers around and settles his eye behind the gun sight. His hands are steadier now, the waiting is over. Whatever happens next, at least the unbearable anticipation has ended. The landing craft hit the shallows and their ramps drop. American soldiers pour out into the surf, wading through chest-deep water toward the beach. And the German machine guns open fire. The tactical advantage shifts decisively. After 90 minutes of helpless terror under naval bombardment, the German defenders can finally fight back. And they have been positioned and trained for exactly this moment, to pour fire into the killing zones created by the beach obstacles and natural terrain. From his bunker, Corporal Bertenrath squeezes the trigger and his machine gun roars to life. Through the water spray and smoke, he can see soldiers falling, disappearing beneath the waves. Others struggle forward, weighed down by equipment, desperately seeking any cover. The beach offers almost none. This is what the German defenses were designed for. Clear fields of fire across open sand, every approach covered by interlocking machine gun positions. The Americans are brave, incredibly suicidally brave, but bravery alone cannot cross that beach. For the first hour, it seems possible that the invasion might actually be stopped. The Americans are pinned down, taking horrific casualties, unable to advance past the shingle at the high water mark. German soldiers who were trembling in terror during the bombardment now fight with desperate intensity, knowing their lives depend on keeping the Allies off the bluffs. Every minute the Americans remain trapped on the beach is another minute for German reinforcements to arrive, another minute to organize a counterattack. But the sheer volume of men and material pouring ashore begins to tell. The Allies have a seemingly infinite supply of everything. More landing craft, more soldiers, more tanks, more explosives. Every time the Germans destroy a landing craft or knock out a tank, 3 more take its place. And critically, the Allied soldiers on the beach are professionals, veterans who've trained for years for this moment. They begin finding weaknesses in the defense, exploiting gaps, working their way forward in small groups while comrades provide covering fire. Major Pluskat, watching from his command post, realizes the situation is deteriorating. His ammunition is running low. Several gun positions have fallen silent, either destroyed by naval fire or overrun by infantry who found covered approaches. He requests permission to withdraw his guns to secondary positions before they're captured. Permission denied. Hitler's orders are absolute. Hold every position to the last man, not one step back. These fanatical orders, Pluskat knows, will doom them all. By mid-morning, American soldiers have reached the base of the bluffs and are beginning the climb up. Some German positions find themselves taking fire from the sides or rear, infiltrators who slip through the defenses. Others run completely out of ammunition and face impossible choices: surrender, withdraw in defiance of orders, or die fighting with empty guns. Young Bertenrath watches an American soldier toss a grenade into a neighboring bunker. The explosion echoes dully. When the smoke clears, that position is silent. His own position will be next. He has perhaps 20 rounds left. By early afternoon, the Atlantic Wall's defense of Omaha Beach has effectively collapsed. Not in a single dramatic moment, but through dozens of small defeats accumulating into systemic failure. Individual bunkers still fight on, isolated and surrounded. Small groups of German soldiers continue resisting from whatever cover they can find. but as a coherent defensive system, the vaunted Atlantic Wall has ceased to exist. Major Pluskat receives orders to abandon his position and withdraw inland. His artillery regiment, once a formidable force, is now a scattered collection of survivors trying to save whatever equipment they can. Many of his guns have been destroyed or captured. The rest must be hauled away by exhausted men and the few horses still alive, moving along roads constantly strafed by Allied aircraft. The retreat is chaotic, units mixing together, officers losing contact with their men, everyone simply trying to reach some imagined safety that keeps receding further inland. Corporal Bertenrath never receives an order to withdraw. His position is simply overrun. American soldiers appear at the bunker entrance, weapons ready. For a moment, Bertenrath considers fighting. He still has a few rounds. He could take one or two with him. But the moment passes. He's 19 years old and wants to live. He raises his hands. The Americans secure him with surprising gentleness, given that his machine gun killed dozens of their comrades just hours earlier. War is strange that way. By nightfall, 34,000 Allied soldiers have established a precarious but expanding foothold on Omaha Beach. The cost has been terrible. Thousands of casualties, units decimated. The beach itself a nightmare landscape of destroyed equipment and fallen men. But they're ashore, they're advancing, and more troops and supplies continue pouring in. The German defenders, by contrast, have lost not just ground, but any hope of mounting an effective counterattack. The mobile reserves they desperately need remain frozen near Calais, still waiting for an invasion that will never come. In headquarters, bunkers miles from the coast, senior German officers begin confronting an unthinkable reality. They've lost. Not lost the battle. Lost the war. If the Allies can successfully land in France, can establish a permanent second front, then Germany faces the strategic nightmare of fighting massive armies on both east and west. The Wehrmacht lacks the resources, the manpower, and increasingly the will to sustain such a defense. Some officers, looking at maps showing Allied penetrations all along the Normandy coast, realize that June 6, 1944, is the day the Third Reich's fate was sealed. Everything that follows will be merely a prolonged collapse. The German experience of D-Day remains one of history's most fascinating perspectives on that pivotal moment. These men, trapped between an invasion force of unprecedented scale and a regime that forbade realistic strategy, fought with a mixture of courage, desperation, and growing despair. They were not monsters. Most were simply soldiers doing what soldiers do, following orders, trying to survive. Understanding their perspective doesn't excuse the regime they served, but it does complete our understanding of that longest day. For the survivors, the war would continue for 11 more brutal months. Major Pluskat survived the Normandy campaign and the war itself, later providing detailed accounts to historians trying to reconstruct the German experience of June 6. Corporal Bertenrath spent the remainder of the war in a POW camp in England, perhaps the safest place a young German soldier could be in 1944. Many of their comrades were not so fortunate. The Normandy campaign would consume entire German divisions in the grinding battles that followed the initial landings. The Atlantic Wall, that expensive symbol of Nazi power, proved to be more propaganda than substance. Concrete bunkers alone cannot win wars, especially when they're undermanned, undersupplied, and facing an enemy with total air superiority and unlimited resources. Hitler's insistence on rigid defense, his refusal to allow tactical withdrawals or flexible responses, turned soldiers into prisoners of their own fortifications. Perhaps the most important lesson from the German perspective of D-Day is this: wars are won not through fortifications or static defense, but through adaptability, realistic strategy, and understanding that courage alone cannot overcome fundamental disadvantages in resources and position. The men in those bunkers did their duty as they understood it, but they were serving a lost cause from the moment that vast fleet appeared on the horizon, bringing with it the weight of Allied industrial power and the determination of free peoples to destroy tyranny. The view from inside the bunkers on June 6, 1944, was the view of an ending, of the Third Reich's ambitions, of Hitler's European fortress, of any possibility that Nazi Germany could survive. The soldiers who witnessed that dawn probably understood it better than their commanders. They saw what was coming, and they knew.